Hello and welcome to Business Daily from the BBC World Service, the business podcast which brings you the trends, the money and the people who make the world and its money go round. Podcasts from the BBC World Service are supported by advertising.
Hi, I'm David Brown, the host of Wondery's show Business Wars. We go deep into some of the biggest corporate rivalries of all time. And in our latest series, apparel brands Zara, H&M, Topshop, and Forever 21 battle to get trends into shoppers' hands the fastest. Listen to Fast Fashion on Business Wars on Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or the Wondery app. Join Wondery Plus in the Wondery app to listen 1 week early and ad-free.
Late August this year, Taliban soldiers firing their weapons in the air to disperse a surging crowd at Kabul airport. This was one of the images the world got to see of Afghanistan in those hectic days. This and throngs of desperate people trying however they might to force their way out of the capital.
They are searching for the people who work for the British forces, for the NATO, for ISAF, for Americans. They will not leave them.
I have a daughter and I was crying for her because she doesn't know about her future.
I can't believe the world abandoned Afghanistan. Our friends are going to get killed. They're going to kill us.
My name's Ed Butler, and here on Business Daily today on the BBC, we're going to be hearing from an Afghan who'd already managed to escape the capital by this time. He had been the Minister of Finance, the very last to serve under President Ashraf Ghani. Khalid Payenda is his name.
To be very honest, I was running away from the president. It had become incredibly difficult to be a Minister of Finance. But I did not know. Honestly, nobody thought, the collapse would be so sudden.
Khalid Payenda hasn't given a broadcast interview since that day in August. Many Afghans feel enraged by the failures of his US-backed government. Reportedly, it was rife with corruption and incompetence, and it abandoned them, they say, in their hour of need. A US-educated economist, Khalid Payenda had already worked in the ministry at a more junior level for several years when he was originally asked to take over the top job. This was back in January. What he found, he says, were finances in a state of chaos, political wrangling over the national budget, and key sources of crucial income, like border customs, he says, weren't finding their way to the Treasury.
My aim was to get Ministry of Finance back on its feet, restore its credibility with the donors and others, and get the revenues up. The revenues had come down, and unlike many of my colleagues in the government, I knew that the Americans were not bluffing when they said they were leaving. So I saw the urgency. I saw a lot of mismanagement, and it became a fight against corruption.
Yeah, tell me about that. You described competition between different customs houses along the Pakistani border, didn't you? Like, the one would say, look, I'll charge you less than the next customs border check if you come to me, but it would still be over the odds, and those customs officers would be pocketing this money.
Yes, the main issue was that the custom tariffs was not applied universally. And every custom house had their own sort of rates, So my first job was the implementation of the customs code, meaning whatever is in the books, you should declare it. And if you don't, I'll come fire you, send you to Attorney General's office for further investigation. And
you did start firing people. And there was a quote you gave around one customs officer who you challenged. He said to you, look, I have to pay the governor of my province a backhander once I collect this money. I have to pay him $40,000 a month. I have to pay reporters from major Afghan news outlets because how come? They claim they've got footage against me. I have to pay the police. And you reckon that was true, right? Customs officers were paying off all these different institutions all the time.
Absolutely. And almost all these crossing points in these provinces, these people were all involved.
They had to pay MPs as well.
Yes. I had an MP come to me and say, we just had elections. I had to pay $1 million in bribe to my 23 other MPs in my group to regain my seat of head of that commission. And can you please replace this guy? Is not bringing me enough money.
So he literally said to you, sack that customs officer. He's not giving me enough backhanders.
Yes.
I mean, the other thing we haven't mentioned is that many of these people were also paying the Taliban for protection money, weren't they? The guys who the government was fighting.
Yes. Taliban would ask for money. I still have clips on WhatsApp that Taliban fighters giving them ultimatums, you have until this day and that day and this much money.
There are those who say, look, you were inside the finance ministry for years, even before you became Minister of Finance. You are part of the problem, not part of the solution.
Yeah, it's a fair criticism. But when I was at the Ministry of Finance, because of the stigma attached with customs, I never dealt with it. But there was a lot of pressure from the parliament. There was pressure from anti-corruption bodies within the government. It's funny, because they would come and meet me, and then going out, they would hand out names of a couple of people that they wanted in the customs to my chief of staff or my assistant, and said, can the minister help transfer this guy or get them appointed somewhere?
You're saying the anti-corruption bodies were corrupt?
Yes, absolutely.
Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the door was rapidly closing. As the US began a final withdrawal of troops and air support, the Taliban was advancing, capturing city after city. Khalid Payenda, watching the disbursement of funds for the war effort, was in a unique position to see this play out. Afghanistan formally, officially, had 300,000 troops, right? That was what they were supposed to have in the army against a Taliban force of maybe 60,000, 70,000. How come so many soldiers just put down their weapons without a fight, do you think?
I think there was the different factors to it. Major one was how the army was set up in the image of the U.S. Army with strong air support that suddenly dried up. This was a huge issue in people's morals. Second one, a few corrupt were bought by Taliban. Some were even given assurances that you will get your job back. You just don't have to fight. But at the end, also, my assumption is we never had 300,000 forces.
You never had an army that size?
We did not have that. The way the accountability was done, you would ask the chief in that province, how many people you have. And, based on that, you would calculate salaries and ration expenses. And they would always be inflated.
I mean, what you were quoted as saying is there were maybe 40 to 50,000 troops, not 300,000. And the rest were just ghosts, you said.
Ghosts, desertions, martyrs who were never accounted for because some of the commanders would keep their bank cards for salaries to withdraw.
So soldiers would die in the field and their generals, their commanders, would just claim their salaries even after they were dead?
Absolutely.
And soldiers who were in the field weren't getting paid, many of them, were they?
They weren't getting paid, yes. There was a lot of mismanagement of how the salaries were done, But it was also mismanagement. For example, in the last few days in June and July that you mentioned, we had stores of ammunition at different places, and there was a lot of misuse in this money that went to the governors without proper accountability. They would be also double dipping, the same people would get paid by the government, but they would also go to Taliban or surrender and then make a deal with them and get paid again. So it was a really bad situation at the end.
It sounds, Khalid Payenda, like it's a catastrophic situation. I mean, you're describing governors corrupt, MPs corrupt, generals taking payoffs. It's like Afghanistan never stood a chance.
Yes, unfortunately, so was the case. I did not see the urgency in my colleagues and understanding the gravity of the issues, or they understood it well, they did not care. Some people made money. I have, for example, my customs director coming to me and saying that this governor is really pushing me. He's saying this government is not going to last 6 more months. are you crazy putting all these custom revenues into the treasury? Why not we just do a 50-50 between us?
Were there no patriots standing there saying we have to fight for the dream of a free, liberal, democratic country?
There were a lot of patriots. Unfortunately, the whole feeling was we cannot change this. This is how the parliament works. This is how the governors work. Everybody would say, the stream is murky from the very top, meaning the very top is involved. There wasn't a real network of these people to believe that we have a critical mass, that we can make a change.
Where was the president in all this?
The president was spread, unfortunately, too thin on different areas. With him, his management style, he wanted to lead everything himself, and sometimes that did not help. He was all over the place, and some of the things that he focused at the end was not the priorities. For example, payments to individual vendors when we were losing a lot of ground, we were losing our sources of revenue, was not something that the president should be focusing on.
You don't accuse him of corruption?
I don't accuse him of financial corruption, but then there was so much propaganda around him that he started mistrusting everybody, But I don't believe he was financially corrupt.
He blamed you, though, for some of the failures of the finance ministry, didn't he?
Yes, but he was right on some of them, but on most of them, no. His blame that, Ministry of Finance is corrupt. I agree with that to a certain extent, but in these issues, absolutely not true.
Khalid Payenda, who says that despite numerous corrupt offers of bribes, he never took a penny as finance minister, other than from his regular salary. When you stood down, it was the 10th of August, 5 days in the end before the Taliban actually reached Kabul. Were you running away?
No. To be very honest, I was running away from the president. It had become incredibly difficult to be a minister of finance. He was losing it a bit at the end. He was blaming Ministry of Finance. He was frustrated because of the losses on the battleground, and mentioned in the last meeting that he lost 40 commandos because of Ministry of Finance, which had absolutely, I still don't know what he meant, because we do not have an army at the Ministry of Finance. They had no payment issues and nothing. And I thought, it's time for me to leave. He asked me for 2 months to come and take the Ministry of Finance. He called it a call from his heart. I responded, and I told him in my resignation that I responded with my heart and soul and came back to try to help. But I think I've lost your trust, and I don't want to do this job. I did not want to make money from this. I did not have political ambition. So if you're not happy, and I left.
How do you look back on the 20 years of NATO-backed Western-style government in Afghanistan? How do you look back on it now?
I think it was a great opportunity lost. Probably the biggest international intervention anywhere in the world, with 40 plus countries, 56 organizations, bringing unprecedented amount of financing. We had a golden opportunity. We all lost it. And unfortunately, who lost the most are the common Afghans. They are worse than they were in pre-9/11 era.
Do you blame the West for some of those failures?
Oh, absolutely. Some of the corruption, some of the mismanagement, some of the waste, they were part of it. They knew part of it. They chose to exclude, for example, Taliban at the start, which was a missed opportunity. But they also chose Afghan allies who continued to have a very bad record on corruption and human rights abuses, just because they fought the Talibs and they were anti-Talibs.
Do you think that they looked the other way, Western institutions, towards the corruption you described?
And most of it, yes. On military front, definitely. It's well documented. But also in development, dealing with these ministers, with governors, if they did not know this is sheer incompetence to be so naive working in an environment like that.
It is as bad as you possibly can imagine. In fact, we're now looking at the worst humanitarian crisis on earth. 95% of the people don't have enough food, and now we're looking at 23 million people marching towards starvation. The next 6 months are going to be catastrophic. It is going to be hell on earth.
The head of the World Food Programme is one of many international officials now describing a humanitarian tragedy unfolding in Afghanistan. Hunger is spreading fast through the country, much of it a direct result of the freezing of Afghanistan's financial assets. International donors won't recognise the Taliban as the country's legitimate government now.
Now, people in the country are starving. Mothers, some of them are reported to be selling their own children in some cases. I mean, is it time, do you think, that the world accepted that the Taliban is in charge and simply released some of this cash assets so that people can be saved?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to advocate for unfreezing all the international assets, but there has to be a mechanism to start with immediate humanitarian assistance. People, as you said, are starving. The winter is going to be extremely bad. UN's projection of 97% of population living under the poverty line is not an exaggeration. I do believe that there has to be a mechanism where people are not hurt. And 35 million people are stuck in this issue of Taliban versus the U.S. Treasury, unfortunately. People who have saved for 20 years. I know people who've worked 2 jobs, very honest individuals, saved everything, for a future and put it in a bank account, and they cannot access any of it. And this is pushing them into poverty. I think it's horrific. But unfortunately, it seems like the U.S. at least does not want to deal with Afghanistan. The president does not want to deal with Afghanistan, and they're tired of it.
There are some in the Ghani administration who have taken to the hills, who've started an armed resistance. Do you support the idea of an armed resistance, an ongoing armed resistance to the Taliban?
No, because this armed resistance brings more bloodshed. I don't think violence is the solution.
What are your regrets?
I regret as an Afghan that we lost this opportunity. The next few years and few decades, I think, is going to be incredibly tough. As you mentioned, people selling their young children into child marriages, and those things haunt me. And whether I was corrupt or not, I was part of that corrupt bureaucracy that let down its people. And obviously that hurts me.
The former Afghan Finance Minister Khalid Payenda, who says that he now works low-paid casual jobs in his area in the eastern United States just to get by. There'll be more on the plight of Afghanistan, of course, across BBC News in the coming days. More from us in Business Daily, same time tomorrow.
Greater connectivity benefits the greater good. And Qualcomm invented 5G breakthroughs that make it possible. See us where 5G is taking on some of the world's biggest challenges. Join us in making the world more connected with 5G.